Rayman is a fantastic franchise, but it's not the only series that Ubisoft has made. Assassin's Creed, of course, I had to mention it. Rayman isn't the only franchise. Why do I feel like I've done this before? Wait. Prince of Persia! How could I forget?
Maybe it's because all Ubisoft seems to release these days are Assassin's Creed games or Just Dance. And I'm not talking about the first Prince of Persia game. Yeah, it was a little rough around the edges. I'm talking about the 3D Prince of Persia game. The Sands of Time. I remember when I was 13, my neighbour had bought this game for his son, but his mother wouldn't let him have it because he was underage, so he gave it to me. My god, this was one of the best free games I have gotten, though I would totally pay for it. I knew nothing when going in, I still have the original copy he gave me. I was immediately pulled into the world of Persia, playing as a young, confident and very acrobatic prince as he journeys to undo his mistake of turning everyone into sand zombies. I couldn't stop playing it. I loved the platforming, the combat, the abilities you get, the story. What an amazing story, and the interactions that played, and the environments you traverse. It's a really nice looking game of its time. Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time is one of my favourite games for sure.
I'll be playing the PS2 version, even though I don't think there's much differences between versions. I believe you can get this on GameCube, and I assume Xbox as well. But without further ado, let's go back in time and play Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time.
At the title screen, you can actually move the prince who is unnamed. In the movie, they gave him a name, Dustin.
Yeah, there was a movie.
Give me the dagger!
I'm not getting into that.
You see him on top of someone's balcony, and when you press start, you can actually move him inside, which starts the game. I like interactive title screens to take you into the game like that. Then we are treated to a cutscene of the prince running through the rain and a girl waking up as the prince starts to begin his tale. We are playing a flashback as the prince's dialogue can be heard throughout the game. As his father the king wages war with his enemy the Maharaj taking over the kingdom, the prince tries to make his father proud by bringing him honor and glory. This is where he finds the Dagger of Time, a mysterious artifact that can temporarily manipulate time if you have enough sand. This is where he learns the ability to rewind time with the dagger. As he returns, the king has also taken the hourglass, the Sands of Time, which goes hand in hand. As they visit the palace of Azad, the vizier who betrayed the Maharaj to side with the king tricks the prince into opening the Sands of Time. It engulfs everyone it touches like a curse and transforms those into sand monsters. The prince had to watch his own father turn to sand and see the mistake he has done. While the vizier wants the dagger for his own means, the prince escapes with it in hand. So the prince must journey forth to find the hourglass to undo all that he has done. That's the basis of the story, and with the prince commentating over it, it feels like a fun fantasy-like story you would tell your kids. He eventually meets Farah, the daughter of the Maharaj, who also survives, and tells him that he can undo his mistakes by striking the hourglass at the top. The prince has no choice but to trust her, and so she joins him. They soon realize though that everyone was either killed or turned to sand monsters. This game does a really good job of ambience going through these quiet areas because everyone is gone. I also love the interactions between the prince and Farah, and watching their relationship develop as she progresses further.
Well, what are you waiting for?
I'm afraid. What if I get into trouble and you have to come chasing after me?
Please.
Do you mean to say you actually need my help?
Yes.
Oh well, in that case.
I'm afraid. What if I get into trouble?
Before we go further into the story, let's talk about the gameplay. As I stated at the beginning, the prince is very acrobatic, like your typical platformer. He can run and jump, but he can also run along and up walls. He can wall jump, running along walls and then wall jumping, shimmy across ledges, swing on ropes, climb poles. The prince can use the environment to his advantage, making for some interesting and fun gameplay, as well as the different camera perspectives used depending on where you are, getting to see some stunning visuals. That includes the combat in this game. Well, sort of. The prince has his sword and then gets the dagger as a secondary weapon to use on the sand creatures. Pressing square allows him to strike with his sword, which you'll be doing most of the time. He can also block and counter. The coolest part though is the ability to run over an enemy to get behind him and take them down by pressing the X button. Now it's cool the first time you do it, but then you do it over and over and over, and don't get me wrong, I still enjoy the combat, and you do get more moves to vary things up a bit, like using walls to bounce off to attack the enemies. The dagger will also give you abilities like slowing down time and being able to freeze enemies and then cutting them in half. One of my favourite moves is the Mega Freeze ability. All the enemies in the area are frozen, but the Prince is super fast and instantly zips across to an enemy and takes them down instantly. The only downside is that it uses all of your sand power on the right and it doesn't last too long. Good for crowd control, but more often than not you still have to deal with more sand creatures afterwards. To get rid of a sand creature, you stab them when they are on the ground to absorb the sand, which powers your dagger. This is also how you restore your tanks. If you take too long though, they will rise up again. You can also counter some of them for a cool quick insta-kill. This game likes to constantly show cinematic camera views for moments like these. I just feel like despite all this and the hordes of enemies you face in this game, the combat isn't quite suited for it. If there were less enemies, sure it could work better. It feels more suited for one-on-one combat, considering when I'm trying to focus on one enemy, another one just keeps interrupting me. I can see this getting really repetitive and boring, and can even be a turn off. Probably the weakest part of the game, but it is still fun. There's a few variety of enemies to face here, from your generic mook to girls holding daggers, big guys with mallets to full-plated armor guys with scimitars. All have to be handled differently, but you'll soon start to see the same old enemy pop up. There's like 2 boss fights in this game. Okay, well, more like 1. I'm not sure I can really call the first one a boss fight, but most of the time you'll just be facing the same sand creatures. You do encounter scarabs, which are pretty easy to deal with honestly. The bats are really annoying though. Most of the time they attack you when you're on like an edge or a beam, so it's very easy to get knocked off to your death since there's so many. When you've beaten all in an area, an orange stream of light appears, and as the prince walks into it, he sees visions, showing him the future. This is basically your "this is what you gotta do next," giving you a rough guide and this is how you save the game. Now the thing I like about this though is that the visions will sometimes trick you, showing the prince dying when he shouldn't, even showing you other things or even spoiling the end game, but you probably wouldn't know that first time playing. The prince has a health meter, and in order to restore it, you drink water. You know what? I don't think I've ever played a game that has you drink fresh water to restore your health. Is Ubisoft trying to tell us something? Drink water and being healthy? You can even upgrade your health via these secret areas. Usually a random hole in the wall or a cracked wall can be opened, and you are transported to a hallway that leads to a magic fountain. When the prince drinks it, he blanks out and he can hear what sounds like a woman's voice saying, "Die?" When he comes to, the hole is patched up and his health is increased. Not sure if these are actually real or a figment of his imagination, but it always had me curious. There's even a scene when Farah watches him go in, but then when he returns, she acts like he never left.
I love it when you do that.
Come with me, please.
No, you go.
Farah, how long have you been gone?
Gone? What are you talking about?
Never mind.
Could it all be hallucinations created by the dagger? You can also increase your sand power, the little white parts of your sand tank, by stabbing these white crystals called sand clouds. You want to get as many of these to increase the power of your dagger. Of course, the main ability here is the rewind ability. Press the L1 button to temporarily rewind time to undo a mistake. If you got hurt, you can undo it. If you fell to your death, you can undo it. As long as you have sand tanks. But once they're gone, that's it till you restore them again. It's definitely a fun mechanic. I mean, imagine being able to rewind time to undo a mistake.
Ow! Hey!
Abilities aren't the only thing that the prince gets. Throughout the game you will find these new swords for the prince to use. The first one you get, you're able to break certain walls. Eventually you get a weapon that's so strong it insta-kills the sand monsters. Can we talk about the structure of these places though, and where these swords are placed? First of all, these areas feel like they were made for the prince. Only some of his skills could reach these switches and levers. Is everyone as capable as the prince? Like, who designed this? Also, who placed these swords here? Now, Farah doesn't just tag along, she will provide covering fire with her arrows. Problem is, she can hit you by mistake, and you can do the same. Yup, she has her own health, and it's much smaller. Enemies will start attacking her if she hits them a few times, so if she dies, it's all over. At least you can rewind to save her, but if you're out of sand, that's it. I've only had issues with this a few times. Normally the sand creatures are focused on you, but if Farah is getting attacked, she calls out to you for help, so keep an eye on her. Apart from this, she will encounter a bunch of small cracks on the wall she can just about slip through, usually required to press a switch to continue or pull a lever, and sometimes you will get separated and have to meet up. You'll be doing a fair few puzzle solving as well in order to progress, moving a box on a switch or area so the prince can run up the wall to reach the ledge, or turning and pulling levers while dealing with the many traps in this game. Apart from large falls and bottomless pits, the prince activates the palace's defense system because of this guy.
Oh, thank God! I was afraid you were one of them! Can you help me activate the Assasin defense system?
This puzzle is one of those first player trap-like puzzles. You can't really die, but it can be time consuming trying to figure out which pillar to pick up. There is a guide on the wall, but it still isn't 100% clear. If you are doing it wrong, he'll say,
Careful! Think ahead!
So it turns out there was one other person besides Farah and the prince, and he insists that the prince should activate the palace's defense system in the hopes it will stop the creatures.
What manner of machine is this?
I told you! It's the palace! Careful! Break your neck and that'll be the end of it for all of us! For the love of God, what are you waiting for? Those demons might come back at any moment!
Conveniently though, the creatures never spawn when the traps are about, and instead the prince has to deal with spikes on the floor, spiked pillars, spinning blades, buzzsaws. What sort of defense system is this? What is this, Scrap Brain Zone from Sonic 1? And after all that effort, the guy dies as soon as we activate them. Or I think. He either got turned into a monster or got killed. Either way, he's dead.
Now, I usually don't do this since most of the games I play are platformers and they don't really have super deep stories. But in this case, I feel like one of the best parts of Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time is the story, and I feel like that's something you should experience yourself. So if you are considering playing this game, I highly recommend skipping to the end of the bit where I talk about the story and then carry on from there. But if you're okay, we're gonna get into spoilers. You're alright? You're okay? Alright then, let's get into this.
Now the main goal, as we know, is to find the hourglass. However, the vizier has taken it to the top of the Tower of Dawn. The reason why the vizier is alive is because of his staff, according to the manual. It says that Farah's bow also protects her from the sands, but it's later implied that it's actually her medallion that protects her and comes into play with the sequel of the game. Of course the prince has the dagger and that's why he's fine. The vizier wants to become immortal with the dagger and that's why he wants it. Thanks to the visions, the prince knows where to go and where the hourglass is. It's implied that the vizier is somewhat controlling the sand creatures. As the prince and Farah progress, their relationship grows and they start to become closer. The prince even starts talking about marrying her.
I could marry her. After all, she is a Maharaja's daughter. A conquered one, but still. Her blood is royal. It's quite natural, really. Her kingdom's conquered, she has nothing, no one to protect her. She needs me. I can see it in the way she looks at me. All I'd have to do is reach out and take her hand, and she'd be mine. Why am I talking to myself?
Okay, real quick, we gotta talk about the prince's commentary in certain sections. He'll start making jokes about Farah and sounding childish when they are separated, constantly talking to himself. I always found these parts pretty funny.
Oh, have you been waiting here all this time? I didn't realize you meant these baths. I went to the other baths, clear across the other side of the city. I had a lovely wash and a rub with fragrant oils. Too bad you weren't there. Stop talking to yourself!
About halfway through the game, Farah will find a book that she tells the prince about, and the prince comments on her finding a book that will get them out of there. But she breaks the fourth wall and says,
If you want to be useful, try finding a book that'll tell us how to get out of here.
This isn't that kind of game.
Game? She thinks this is a game.
one of the visions you get in the second bath area shows a spoiler to the endgame. The prince sees at some point that he puts the dagger down and that Farah steals it from him. However, he does not comment on it. Later on though, when he reunites with Farah, he sees it again and immediately starts to doubt her. The more visions he sees as they get closer to the Tower of Dawn, he sees it more and more, until they finally reach the hourglass. However, as the prince attempts to strike the hourglass, he hesitates because of what his kingdom did to Farah. This gives the vizier time to knock him and her off the hourglass, spiraling to what looks like a tomb. Then Farah asks the prince on why he didn't trust her, and everything goes back around them. Farah tells him of a secret word her mother used to tell her, a word that would open a secret door. After the prince says the word, the tomb opens and it sounds like Farah climbs in. Here we are running down a hallway that looks strikingly similar to the hallways that takes you to the magic fountains, with this strange eerie music. When we reach the bottom, the prince can hear Farah talk but cannot find her, and we are surrounded by various doorways which teleports you. If you get it wrong, you appear at the bottom. The trick is to listen out for the drops of water. If you hear it near a doorway, then it's the right one. Eventually the prince gets teleported to the top where he meets Farah swimming in a pool. He puts down his weapons and joins her. After the moment they shared, he wakes up back in the same tomb as he was before, but can't tell if it was just all a dream. However, just like the visions, he wakes up to find his sword and dagger being taken by Farah, who proceeds to make her way back to the hourglass. Of course, defenseless, what can the prince do? That's when the game just gives you the best weapon of all. You can just instantly kill enemies with it. The interesting thing is that, despite not having the dagger, he can still see the visions. Maybe it's something to do with the pendant Farah left him? This section actually tests you, as you can't rewind time anymore. I like this. It's a, hey, I hope you haven't relied on the dagger and I hope you've gotten better at the game. Now you get to do core acrobatic platforming and you can't make mistakes. Early on, one of the visions also shows Farah dying as the prince tries to save her, but once again, he doesn't comment on it. He eventually catches up to Farah, who he warns not to use all of the sands. But of course she does and gets pushed off the ledge by a sand creature. The prince tries to hold on to the dagger, but it's stabbing him, making him bleed, so Farah decides to let go, falling to her death. The prince can't rewind to save her and has to take down the remaining horde of sand monsters. After finding her body, the vizier shows up again trying to tempt the prince with immortality, power and riches. But the prince finally decides to stab the hourglass, undoing everything he did, including the release of the sand. It takes him all the way back to his chamber before his father launched an assault on the Maharaj. He remembers everything with the dagger in hand. This is where we find out whose balcony it was at the beginning of the game. It was of course Farah's, which she is now alive and doesn't remember the prince. He tries to give her back the dagger and explain his story. So really, even though we were hearing his story, he was actually telling Farah the entire time, which I like that. Then they are interrupted by the vizier, who challenges the prince. This is the final boss fight. It's okay, it's still the same old run over him and slice him though, rinse and repeat. The vizier admits he's a traitor and the prince finishes him off. Farah thanks the prince but doesn't believe his story as he goes for a cheeky kiss. She's not happy and so rewinds back to undo it. God, I wish I could just do that. He then tells her it was just a story and gives her back the dagger. But as he runs off, she asks his name, which he replied, Kakalukia, which is the secret word she never told anyone but him, leaving her speechless. I think that was a great way to end this amazing story. I never get tired of it.
What an amazing story, and what an amazing way to end the story. I love everything about it. I never get tired every time I play it. Like I said, I feel invested in the story, and it does feel like, because of the way that prince is talking to you, communicating to you, and telling to you as a tale. It does feel like one of those folklore tales that you sit around the campfire, not quite like a horror one, sort of, maybe, I guess, with the sand zombie. And like I said, the gameplay is fun as well. It's one of my favourite games, for sure. But before we end things off, there is something a little bit extra that you can do. Remember that I was talking about the OG Prince of Persia? Well, guess what? You can actually unlock it. Yeah, you can actually unlock the original Prince of Persia. And what you do is that at a certain point, you find out there's actually a hidden door. Now usually hidden doors, or hidden walls I suppose, normally have cracks open. This is when you get the sword where you can actually break the cracked walls open. But this time it's actually completely hidden. But if you pull this lever you can hear a gate sound open. So you assume, where's the gate? And that unlocks the original Prince of Persia. So if you do want to play the original Prince of Persia to see where the roots came from, you can. I'll stick with Sands of Time if that's alright with you. Question of the video. If you could rewind one moment in your life, you only do it once, and you can only go back about 5 minutes. What would you use it on and why? Let me know in the comments, and I want you to go crazy with this. It can be something silly like just undoing a mess on the floor, you dropped a carton of milk or something, anything you like. Let me know in the comments, I look forward to seeing them. But with a game that does really, really well, and a lot of people claim that Prince of Persia Sands of Time is their favourite game of all time, and I can see it. It's definitely up there for me as one of the best games. I love it. Like every time I go back to it, it's always a fun experience. But we all know what happens when a game does well, right? You gotta make a sequel, and that's going to be Prince of Persia: The Warrior Within. A lot more dark and edgy compared to Sands of Time, I'll say that. So when we do return back to the Prince of Persia series, this is a game that we will be looking into. 16 plus. Oh boy, I'm ready for some edgy.